I was first starting in birth work or trying to understand entering that world here in the Pacific Northwest specifically. I was not finding educational spaces around birth work or reproductive support that were by and for people of color, let alone safer for queer and trans people to learn as well. So as a trans person, trying to just learn about, how to be a support for pregnant and birthing folks, I just kept getting a block. Just couldn't learn because the way that things were structured and spoken, the people teaching, who they were teaching for and about were just not communities that I felt respected in my world. So yeah, when you can't see yourself reflected in the curriculums or in the teachers or even your peers, it can be hard to keep learning or to feel like there's a point to understand where you're going with it. So I started asking around other orgs and trying to figure out where I could go learn. And I ended up meeting up with the Prison Doula Project at the time and taking one of their workshops. They were based out of Olympia at the time. And yeah, really beautiful, strong work. But again, predominantly white folks. It's not with and for people of color. And so I was just asking them, hey, do you all do these workshops like more centered on people of color, like teachers of color, supporting students of color coming through? And they were like, not yet. Said, hey, do you want to do something? And so like I said earlier, I was naive enough to be like, sure, maybe I can, So there were folks in the Prison Doula Project, mainly Danny Waxwing, who were really big supports of me trying to find the resources and also other people to start creating just even like a workshop, just like one workshop, right? And so then I got together with Emmy Yamasaki and McLaughlin, who's a midwife local to this area, who's also queer and a person of color. And at the time was kind of newer to her practice. Yeah, we started to just meet up and start figuring out what would we want to see, even as one workshop looked like. That was by mixed board, queer and trans, BIPOC. So that's just what it started with, one workshop, trying to figure that out. And then getting, any kind of funding or support for even a workshop, right? Which ended up turning into a few days of training for the very first one. It was Cutie Puck, birth work project back then. And obviously it's changed now to better names. It was just me trying to figure out something, to gather people. But I'm really happy that from the first crew that came through, LL Imeno was one of the first people to attend that training. And through him, all the support came in to take this little seedling that we had just sprouted and then grow it into something bigger. I actually had to step away from Cutie Puck Birth Work Project for a little bit because I took a break from birth work in general and birth education, reproductive justice work, because I was just getting pretty burned out and feeling like my goals around getting trans people in the space was actually just kind of dropping out in certain ways. And then I also needed to pursue my own path around pregnancy to just, understand where that went, where it's going, so that I could return to the work in a better way. I was getting a lot of built up stuff. So in coming back, I only came back because LL invited me back. LL was like, hey, come back. We need you. Look what you've been doing. And so I only had gotten to see kind of in and out, the transitions that were happening, the growth, Ale coming more into the fold, and Maria coming into the fold. And these were kind of just people I'd seen passing or names. And when Ella really invited me back, more intentionally, then I got to really see what was happening and experience it. And so that transition into Lifewerq, I got really excited about because it was more focused on trans people, not just in supporting our education around birth work, but also our forms of transitions that are inclusive of, but also beyond pregnancy, right? Yeah. And so, all of our different metamorphoses and those stages of being alive and also of dying too. And so supporting that work for us yeah, I realized like, oh yeah, Lifewerq makes a lot more sense. So it's beautiful to see how our curriculum also folds in like ways to support trans people through different aspects of our journey. That is, in addition to like navigating pregnancies, and that to me also brings more trans people to the trainings as well, right? So really still keeping it focused on our community's needs.
I was literally like South Africa. I was like, no, don't say that. That's fucked up. But I also, and I,
Black
but my partner is like, I'm glad you know that's the truth.
I do understand. I was thinking about the whole day when I did say that.
You know what? I'm sorry.
No, it's
I'm
okay.
sorry that I didn't assume
you and I were
wrong. I see you seeing. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Namaste.
I was in my last year of college and I took a class called Queering the Race to Reproduction. And it was all about, like queer and trans access to reproduction, what that looks like for us, like accessing donors, surrogates, those types of things. And that's when I learned what doulas are. Yeah, that kind of opened up this world for me. And yeah, I felt a really strong connection to that work because as a child, I was always really obsessed with babies and pregnant people. I grew up in the church and I didn't like going to like the kids' church or the big church. And I preferred to like be in the baby's room, just helping out. And just kind of like made a lot of friends with parents that way and was invited into a couple of their births as a child myself as kind of like a little helper. So yeah, when I learned like what birth work is, I was like, oh, like that makes a lot of sense for me and like my interests that began in childhood. Back in 2018 is when I first took a doula or birth work training through a program based in Seattle. And I was kind of struggling a little bit with the curriculum and the things they were focused on. It was very white focused and cis focused. And so I was kind of looking around for other spaces in the Seattle area that I could fit in with. And that's when I found Lifewerq Project. And at the time we were called Kitty Pop Birthwork Project. And that's when I met LL Jimeno, who very quickly became a big mentor in my life for birthwork and life and organizing as well. And he really like opened up my world in terms of birthwork and helped me understand that like as a trans mixed Black person, like I have a space in this work, despite not really feeling that from the start of my training and getting into a hospital program and kind of a more professional birth doula route. So after meeting him, I kind of like went under his wing for a little while and then started co-facilitating birthwork trainings with him as well. They were managing, or like creating connections between like us in the Pacific Northwest and other birthwork organizations in the South and just doing like a lot of coalition building around Black and brown and trans birthing justice and trans justice. And that just really interested me and like created a space in the birthwork world where I felt at home. For that time span from like 2018 to 2021, I continued working alongside LL and facilitating trainings, helping them out with like logistical aspects of the project. And then kind of shortly after COVID began, their health started declining, and they passed away in April of 2021. And prior to that, we had been talking about transitioning leadership of the project and what they wanted that to look like. And he, kept bringing up like wanting me and Ale to be the ones to steward the project next. And, there was a ton of grief involved in that year and in their passing. because he meant so much to me and was just like a huge mentor and role model and friend. So it took about like a year after his passing until me and Ollie were ready to take on the project and steward that. And yeah, we lost a lot of kind of like access to like emails and like archive and things like that in their passing. So we didn't necessarily feel like we were starting from square one, but we're definitely like trying to recover things and like build the project back up. So yeah, we kind of spent like those first few months, like connecting with funders and like figuring out, okay, how are we going to make this work? What do we want it to look like? Because now we have like, this beautiful foundation that we can grow into whatever we want it to look like. Ollie and I both felt called to kind of, give the project new life. And part of that was giving it a new name. And we thought, the work we're doing is so expansive. It really does go beyond birth work. So we thought Lifewerq would be a really, really fitting name for our project.
So yeah, I would say, the biggest comfort measure it can give anybody is love. And so you might not know that, like, all those things are really helpful, but if you're not doing that with intention and without care, it can actually be even harmful. So always just remembering to, set your intention and come back to it as things get intense. And one of the ways that helps me come back is like having like the rose or the different sprays, because I don't need to have smoke, right? Especially if we're in a hospital or something like that. This is really helpful. And energy sticks. And so the more, like, spiritual hygiene is just as important as, washing your hands and all of those things. Right? Like, say there's a big belly, right? We want to get the belly, especially underneath, right? Because this is where it's pulling on the bladder.
I came into connection with Lifewerq Project back when it was known as Kitipak Birthwork Project. And I learned about it through a friend who was going to be attending the training, a birthwork training. And I had already been doing birthwork in my community. And I had never taken a formal training in the sense, and I think I had a lot of resistance to it because I'm a trans person, also a person of color, I'm also Indigenous. And I just had a lot of concerns about going into a space and kind of like having my relationship to a work that I felt so called to do, to have any kind of like internalized colonial impositions, just because I knew the nature of birthwork, especially being a birth worker, or the word doula, which is like very common. And I know a lot of communities of color use that word, and I understand why, but the root of the word is like a female servant or a female slave. And so just even that already had me kind of turned off. For me, I wanted to have an opportunity to deepen, my clinical skills and things like that, because I was definitely coming to birth work from more of a cultural ceremonial perspective. But I had a lot of hesitancy as to what would be the right space for that, because I didn't want it to be a triggering space. And in addition, I didn't want to pay all this money for something when I was barely making a living myself. And so when I learned about the birthwork training through QTPOC Birthwork Project, it kind of sounded like a fantasy. Like I really didn't believe that it existed, but it did. And I went. And interestingly enough, Amaria was one of the facilitators at the time, and now Amaria is my co-lead of the project. But it was a really transformative experience for me. I had never been in a space that was by and for trans BIPOC, trans Black, Indigenous people of color, in that way. Like in communities, partying, things like that, of course, maybe a short workshop, but in this sense, it was 5 days of literally like eating together, learning together, sharing the same space, dreaming together, and all of these things, and just being in the presence of other like trans BIPOC was so deeply nourishing. And it helped me connect all of the dots of like why I was doing what I was doing. It helped me feel legitimized in my role as a birth worker, something that before I had always I felt more of like a responsibility to do it because I knew I was good or something, or I had the capacity to do it. But after attending that training, I felt more embodied in my role as a birth worker, and really feeling that my experience as a trans person isn't something to compartmentalize outside of my relationship to birth work, but actually like an integral part of what makes working with me or receiving care from me, being in community with me, it's an integral part of it. Like, I can't separate it. It's just all together in the same way that like my indigeneity or also being like Afro-Indigenous, like all of those identities, are part of what shapes how I know what I know, how I see what I see, and how I love in the ways that I love. And so after that, I just felt really inspired and continued to be a supporter of the project and just find ways to connect with community.